Hi, this is John Cullen. Welcome to another episode of Heroes of the Pandemic. I'm joined once again by Amy Question It. We've been together now for a couple weeks. This is our third show together in as many weeks. And we've been discovering so many new developments regarding this avian influenza outbreak that it just seemed like it wasn't really a good time to stop. So there's more information that we wanted to share. And Amy, welcome back to the show. Great to have you back.
Thank you for having me back.
It's my pleasure. So do you want to just sort of give folks sort of a recap of what we've learned so far? Sort of, what would the takeaways be from the first two sessions that we've done? I'm sure a lot of people's heads are spinning because we're not really talking about SARS-CoV-2. We're talking about another pandemic, something that started way earlier, started in China, and seems to have a major avian factor to it. So what's your take as far as just sort of bringing people up to speed that maybe didn't have a chance to see the first two shows that we did?
I think the key thing is this timeline that we're covering, and we'll finish the rest of it. But, looking at 2013, this H7N9 comes around. It's 30 to 40% lethal. It attacks primarily males and the elderly. Time goes on, 2014, late 2013, 2014, Yoshi starts doing gain of function with it. We have the 2014 pause of gain of function, which Yoshi continues to do his gain of function. And in there, in 2017, of course, the pause was lifted. But within all of this, we've got development of more spread. We've got it going to Taiwan. We've got it in Malaysia. We've got it in 2015, our first case in humans in British Columbia. We have, of course, everything that you've been covering so well with the chickens and all of these fires and all of the culling. And that, I think, really is where things shifted in 2017 when they started vaccinating the chickens in China, and they had these mutations. And I think from there, it just blew up, so to speak. And of course, in that timeline of the gain of function up to 2016, 2017, they also started doing trials for vaccines for humans for H7N9. And we found out, of course, that it was Moderna, it's Pfizer, it's Sanofi, Novartis, and some big players in there.
Yeah, and then for some reason, the H7N9 tests were taken off the market or not available for some reason.
Nikki, thank you. State officials say the CDC is reformulating portions of test kits that were flawed. In today's news conference, state epidemiologist Sarah Park says the CDC plans to send new kits to all public health labs in the next week. Governor David Ige added he spoke to the CDC and says because of Hawaii's location, it would take the state at least a week to get any test results back. That's why Hawaii needs its own test kits.
Today, the director of the CDC testifying before Congress, fielding questions about the delay in getting test kits to health providers around the country.
The CDC's focus was to provide testing for the public health system. There's a whole other system we need testing for, clinical medicine. And I'm happy to say now, with LabCorp and Quest both operational as of yesterday, there's really laboratory testing availability to any doctor's office that can go through LabCorp and Quest. I would have loved the private sector to be fully engaged 8 weeks ago.
And yet there was a lot happening in China prior to SARS-CoV-2. So before the first patients in Wuhan, before December 2019. So that's the thing I want to make sure that people understand, that we're not talking about anything having to do with the bats, the pangolins, the raccoon dogs, none of that stuff. This has nothing to do with Wuhan Institute of Virology. This is all about something completely different that started way, way earlier in 2013. Right? So that's what we've been looking at. The SARS-CoV-2 thing is sort of the connective part here, is that both viruses were discovered in the first patients in Wuhan. And that's how, you and I just sort of dropped one picnic basket and went and picked up the other one. And we're like, well, hell with this one. Well, this is way more interesting. Let's find out more about this. Let's find out what's happened with the chickens. So this goes far, far earlier, way earlier than the first patients in Wuhan, way earlier than the Wuhan military games. That was October 2019. I mean, we've already had Crimson Contagion. We've already contracted with Pfizer. The Novartis product is already in clinical trials. I mean, so there's a lot that was happening long before SARS-CoV-2. And I think you and I don't want to speak for you, but I have found this to be the more interesting of the two stories and the two pandemics, because I like chicken.
Well, and you can't forget, too, that we've also got DARPA and BARDA involved in this as well. In all of the surveillance, you've got Craig Venter, who is surprisingly to me, who is the one who took the sequence from China for H7N9 and then started doing this work with the vaccines. So I kind of scratched my head on that one. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting backstory.
This is the timeline from The Who. The Who lays out the timeline. Let's listen to what the guy says.
On January 9, Chinese authorities made a preliminary determination of a new coronavirus identified in a hospitalized person with pneumonia in Wuhan. 2 days later, Chinese authorities issued additional information updating case numbers to 41 from initially 59 and reporting one death. Chinese authorities also shared the complete genomic sequence with WHO and with the public.
What? There's 41 cases and one guy's dead. Let's sign a contract with Moderna and buy vaccines for all of America. There's 41 cases. One guy's dead. And they're publishing. Dude, they published the genetic sequence when 41 people were sick with pneumonia and one guy was dead. Why? Why? Who gives a shit? It's a place in China nobody's even heard of.
Yeah.
All right, let's run this video one more time from The Who. This is official. This is, by the way, this is UN Geneva, by the way. This is from the UN in Geneva. One more time. Let's listen to this timeline. Right. Let's listen to the timeline.
On January 9, Chinese authorities made a preliminary determination of a new coronavirus identified in a hospitalized person with pneumonia in Wuhan. 2 days later, Chinese authorities issued additional information, updating case numbers to 41 from initially 59, and reporting 1 death. Chinese authorities also shared the complete genomic sequence with WHO and with the public.
Well, and today you were sharing some content that went back to some turkeys in Minnesota, but not the 1988 or 1998 turkey. I think it was 88. 1988 was the first turkey in Minnesota where we saw the strain. But you published some stuff today that showed that there was something in Tennessee, something in Minnesota? But
it was Minnesota, I believe.
Yeah. So we're finding more and more documented history of H7N9 in other locations. Ohio, Delaware, Czechoslovakia, or Czech Republic, whatever it's called now. But nobody seemed to get terribly concerned until that 2013 outbreak in China. And then the fact that it goes highly pathogenic in the last session we had. I think the goosebump moment was when you shared with us the fact that the researchers found 4 minor changes to the H protein on one side of the river or something like that. And that was exactly the way that Kawaoka had described what he would need to do to make the normal pathogenic version of this highly pathogenic. And when the researchers discovered it, it was almost like, well, didn't he say exactly that? So that was sort of really, I think, the culmination of what we discovered last time. Why don't you take us through the slides that you've prepared for us? We're right now looking at what happened in the 2017 timeframe. So this is now still prior to Crimson Contagion, prior to the Pfizer contract for the mRNA for influenza, but this is the period where the gain of function stuff is lifted, right? So why don't you walk us through that, if you would?
Okay. So, and just to remind those who have been listening, in 2017, that is when we had the first outbreak in poultry in the Tyson chicken plant. And then, of course, from there, they found out that it was in Alabama, Georgia, and Kentucky, and I believe one other state. I can never remember that last state.
The effects of the H7N9 bird flu have been over 120 Chinese infected, and at least 39 have died in China. But Tyson Foods has also been affected. Their international chicken sales units have been seriously cut. Their stock has fallen the most in 5 years. Tyson reported a 10-fold increase in operating losses from its international unit for the fiscal second quarter. The Chinese may have returned to the KFC after being convinced that the cooked chicken is safe to eat. But the purchase of imported chicken from Tyson hasn't recovered in China. And that was the primary reason their international business fell by $30 million.
The CEO at Tyson Foods, Donnie Smith, said yesterday that Tyson will have to work through this issue in China. They have dialed back the international operations a bit. While Tyson is listed as the largest meat processor in the U.S. and second in the world only to Brazilian JBS, Tyson is mostly regarded for their chicken. The stock on the New York Stock Exchange fell 9.9%, the biggest drop since December 2008. Tyson's per-share profit in the quarter ending March 29th was 60 cents, lower than most analysts had predicted.
In addition to the 54 chicken processing plants, Tyson has 13 beef plants and 6 pork plants. The company is the largest exporter of beef, and with the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus now spread to 27 states, Tyson expects the pork industry to fall 4% this year.
But they confirmed that it was the same highly pathogenic strain that was over in China. So here the government gets involved, and they contact this Protein Sciences, which is in Connecticut, to start working with H7N9 vaccines for humans. And in that last bullet point, you can see there it's called 2017 H7N9, whatever that is. Sorry, my eyes are blurry. Worked all day.
IIV, which
Yes.
which is a weird way to put the number 3. Normally you put III, not IIV, right?
And I don't know if there's more to that or not. Why not just call it the 2017 H7N9 vaccine? So I don't know.
Interactive something vaccine, or interstitial vaccine, or something. It's an II vaccine. It's some sort of an II vaccine. We'll figure that out later. All right,
Yeah.
so this is interesting. So Protein Sciences is tasked with this in 2017. Novartis
And-
is already in clinical trials, though. We covered that last
Right.
time, right?
Correct. And so they've reached out to this Protein Sciences, which happens to be a biotech company who develops vaccines. They're big into biopharmaceutical, specific to that of influenza, I might add. And somewhere in 2017, this Protein Science, which I will be making a post about what they do, specifically with their vaccines. It's quite interesting, but they acquired Sanofi in 2017 for about $750 million. So something was going on.
What? wait. They didn't buy Sanofi the company. There's no way.
They said they acquired it.
The product? Maybe they acquired Sanofi's research on the influenza vaccine for $750 million. They didn't buy.
The article is vague.
Yeah, and then it's probably written by a 24-year-old.
And I only bring this one in because this is where Dr. Fauci specifically made a comment to this. So he's well aware of H7N9 at this point.
Is that the second quote down there? Is that from Dr. Fauci? As we
Yes.
experience one of the
Yes.
worst. All right, let me take a look at this. So a vaccine has been developed by Sanofi Pasteur with support from the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, that's BARDA, part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Dr. Anthony Fauci, NIAID director, said in a statement, "As we experience one of the worst seasonal influenza epidemics in recent years here in the United States, we also must maintain a scientific focus on novel influenza viruses, such as H7N9, the one that I gave Kawaoka all that money for just a couple years ago during the gain of function pause, and told him he didn't have to pause, he'd do whatever he wants, that have the potential to cause a pandemic, and that's why I gave him the money." Oh my God, they're crazy. All right, you ready to go to the next slide?
Yes.
Okay. In addition,
So
the virus has spread more broadly across the country, increasing the chances more people will be infected in the future. Adding to the concern is the fact that the virus is evolving and has essentially split into two groups that are now different enough that vaccine for one might not protect well against viruses from the other. Now you tell me, again, I'm not a virologist, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I used to play doctor when I was 6 years old. Sure sounds to me like we've got two, it just said here, we've got two pretty different strains here, and a vaccine for one might not work for the other. Sure does sound like Kawaoka's gain-of-function strain got mixed in to the pond with all the regular ducklings, and it's like there's a super duck and there's all the regular ducks. That's what it sounds like to me. The Kawaoka strain got mixed into this not so highly pathogenic version of H7N9 that was circulating, and all of a sudden we've got this highly pathogenic problem, and all of a sudden we've got no test kits, and next thing you know the chicken coops are burning down, and next thing you know the chickens are dead. So I don't know. I could just be overreacting. I could be watching too many movies. This could just be coincidental. I don't know. What do you think? Two groups.
Well,
The virus is evolving and split into two groups. Sounds
mhm.
organic to you, or sounds like Kawaoka? What do you think?
Well, it's hard to say, I'll be honest, but, I have to question it because also in 2017, that's when they started doing the vaccination in China in these chickens. So was it something in the vaccine? Was it, the gain of function? Was it a combination of all the above? You've got China getting vaccinated the chickens. The United States is worried about having a vaccine that will be effective because it has mutated. And what do we do about the stockpile? Tyson Chicken and 4 other states in the United States have popped up now having it in their poultry. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do?
It's in the food supply. It's in the food supply in China. It's in the food supply in the United States. And for some reason, CNN is more interested in Kanye West's new wife. What can I tell you? All right. Unreal. Now, so this next bullet point, though, sort of gets to the heart of the creepy matter, which is this issue with the stockpiled vaccines and the fact that there may have been stockpiled vaccines that may have been somewhat effective. So let me read this for the audience for you. The U.S. stockpile currently contains enough vaccines to inoculate about 12 million people against the older lineage of H7N9, the southern or Pearl River Delta viruses. The antibodies generated by the stockpiled vaccine now appear to be suboptimal. That sounds like Fauciism in their reactivity to these new Eastern lineage viruses. I love it. Amy, when they start telling you it's the Chinese virus, it's the Chinese version, it's the to me that's them saying it's Kawaoka's version. They protesteth too much.
And they specifically say that it's this Pearl River that's the older. And I told you today, I think, that this other, I don't know how to pronounce the Yangtze River Delta,
Yeah.
that runs right along and through that Wuhan area. And that is where they're saying their north is all of the highly pathogenic version or strain of this H7N9. So, yeah, there's definitely.
Again, we would need it. We would need the outbreak to happen in China. Fauci knows it's already happening in China in 2013. And the fact that we're seeing this the highly pathogenic version in China, I don't know, man. I think something's up here. And then, of course, we get to the third bullet, which sounds like you're watching a Mission Impossible movie with, what was it, Polariphone and the two, right? One was the disease and one was the solution, and it was one of the earlier Mission Impossible movies. So that means we'll need to make a new vaccine that will induce an immune response that will be cross-reactive and neutralize this new lineage of viruses. Bright said. Now that's Rick Bright. Rick Bright is the one that spoke at the Milken conference that wears the funny socks all the time. Yeah. All right. So this next map that you have here from 2017 is showing a number of locations. The highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak. And I'm looking at a map here. What can you tell us about the map?
I just put this in here to show that this is from 2017. Again, to remind everyone, they started vaccinating the chickens in China in 2017. And instead of being, one specific area, it's now gotten broader and wider across their map.
All right. So it is spreading. It's in the poultry. And the next slide is bird flu spreads. The U.S. concludes its vaccine doesn't provide adequate protection. This is in March of 2017. U.S. officials charged with preparing the country for influenza pandemics have been assessing the state of an emergency stockpile of vaccines against that strain. Now, keep in mind, Trump is inaugurated January 17th or something of that year. He's in the job 8 weeks. And they're up in his face with all this stuff. We got the chickens, and we got China, and we got a virus, and he's like, "Oh, I hate viruses. Somebody pass me the hand sanitizer." He hates germs. He's a real germaphobe, and they're bringing this problem to his desk. Week 1. This is underway. This is happening as he's getting sworn in. No wonder Fauci's predicting a surprise outbreak. Surprise what? So Fauci knows what's going on the Yangtze River. So they're saying we don't have adequate protection, and we're assessing the state of the stockpile. So if the state of the stockpile is pretty crappy 8 weeks into his presidency, is that his fault or is that the previous administration's fault?
Everything's Trump's fault.
I'd say so, right? I mean, clearly it was perfect New Year's Eve, but 4 weeks later is a disaster. All right, so the conclusion, the stored H7N9 vaccine doesn't adequately protect against a new branch of the virus family. Did they test that, or they just are coming to this conclusion based on how much gain of function Yoshi did? Like, did anybody test this and say, so, we tested this, right? We got 150 people that were sick with one and 150 people sick with the other. I don't think they did that. I don't
think they did either.
Yeah, I'm just reading here that they're like, it seems like we need a new vaccine, so let's spread some money around and we'll go to Switzerland. The store doesn't adequately protect this. Rick Bright with the funny socks, heads BARDA, said the H7N9 vaccine in the stockpile is not going to fend off a new family of these viruses that has emerged in China. So he knows. He knows what's going on. He knows it's Kawaoka strain. Don't tell me he doesn't know. Known as the Eastern or Yangtze River Delta lineage. This is the new one.
This is the highly pathogenic.
Yeah, the Yangtze River Delta lineage rather than the Kawaoka from Wisconsin strain. So that's synonymous. To me, that's synonymous. If you're going to call it the Yangtze River Delta lineage, that's the Kawaoka, Wisconsin strain. Now, I could be wrong. This could have happened naturally. This could be organic. I don't think so. No way. Not with that cleavage site that you were telling us about. Right? I posted something on Twitter. I said CGG is out. Picatar, whatever it is now, is in.
And you have to remember, too, around this time, because of the Milken Institute, Fauci's big dream is to have this universal influenza vaccine.
Right.
He's saying, hey, these vaccines aren't going to cut it for the current H7N9. So we need to get going on a different vaccine so that we have protection going forward for the people should a pandemic come out. And that's where we roll from.
But you showed us, when you showed us the table that Moderna gave their presentation, I think it was at the Goldman Conference or something, and you showed us that table last time that showed that they had a whole bunch of mRNA products in development. Zika, chikungunya, RSV, all this stuff was in mRNA development in 2016.
Right.
So it's
specifically the H7N9 and the H10N8. Those were made in 2016. So
they're already getting off eggs with or without permission. They're doing it. They don't have their modernization. They don't have the executive order yet, but they're doing it anyway. So, so then the next slide, you got Rick Bright. I can't see his socks in this photo, but I'm pretty certain his socks match his tie.
Blow the system up. I mean, obviously we can't just turn off the spigot on the system we have and then say, hey, everyone in the world should get this new vaccine we haven't given to anyone yet. But there must be some way that we grow vaccines mostly in eggs, the way we did in 1947. I mean, we live in a world where I can download whatever song I want onto my phone at command, and we grow vaccines the way we did 70 years ago. What is going on with that?
So that would be
and I had to put little Scott Gottlieb in there.
Oh,
as
there
well.
he is. Yeah, in the background. Yeah. Now, do you think that's his real hair? Do you think that those are? I mean, that guy's got hair that's thicker than herring in the North Sea. I mean, that is some thick hair. All right, so that's Scott Gottlieb off to the right. Now he's on the board of directors of Pfizer. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and remember, of course, prior he was also on. He was part of the FDA. So they're making all this magic happen and switching spots around, and
Interesting.
which then, of course, brings us to the FDA.
Well, so this next one is this 2017 continued, the pathway to a universal vaccine. And this is something that Taubenberger had been talking about for a long time, this universal vaccine. Taubenberger, we know, has got the 1918 H1N1 strain from Breivik Mission, Alaska. We know Warrabee's got a strain earlier, from, but it's also H1N1. And then Kawaoka says, I'm going to trump you all. Look what I did. Nobody's got any immunity to this. H7, nobody has any immunity to this. And I'll get rid of the trypsin, and I'll turn off the interferon trigger, and Taubenberger's got nothing compared to what I've got right now. And so this shifts the focus, I think, in this world of Rick Bright and Marion Koopmans and all those people. I think Kawaoka shows up with the beast. And I think he grabs the spotlight away from Taubenberger, because this whole discussion about universal vaccines for influenza, that's been Taubenberger's white whale for the last 20-something years.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden Kawaoka shows up with something that's scarier, deadlier. I think Kawaoka stole Taubenberger's thunder here.
Could very well be.
The pathway to universal influenza vaccine. The pathway to universal influenza vaccine. Anthony Fauci meeting report, October 17th, 2017. 2 weeks after the Las Vegas shooting. Universal vaccine. So at this point, I think it's H7N9 that's driving these discussions. It's no longer 1918 H1N1. That's my takeaway from what you're showing me here, is that this is the new driver. This is the new impetus. And it had been 1918 H1N1. And listening to a presentation that Bob Malone gave with Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Merle Nass, he was saying that the whole influenza vaccine industrial complex is kind of based on the threat of another 1918 H1N1 type pandemic.
Primary objective of the annual flu campaigns is not to prevent influenza death. I don't know if we're all aware of that. The primary objective is to maintain warm base manufacturing capacity. Meryl smiles.
Yeah.
So the logic here, and I think that Jonathan is touching on some underlying truths.
Robert, let me just interrupt you for a second, so that an audience who does not, who's not following what you're saying, is there's a military impulse, a national security impulse, that we need vaccine manufacturing capacity that can instantly ramp up if the Russians attacked us with a weaponized anthrax.
That's part of it. But in the case of influenza, there is let's say a long-standing, what's the right word? Urban fairy tale sort of legend. 1918. and what happened, and that it was all due to this horrible H1N1 influenza virus, and it disregards all of the other aspects of that public health event, including the apparent bacterial co-pathogen, let's say. Is that fair, Meryl?
Yes.
And so this story has absolutely been used to justify a variety of public health investments and interventions, and has absolutely, just like the biodefense story, has been used to generate an industry with all the associated bells and whistles in terms of the, let's say, biodefense military industrial complex. That also has, by the way, a very strong academic complex component to it. Influenza virus has long been kind of a weaponized tool to justify various infrastructure investments. And
you never hear them mention H7N9. Nobody says, this is the one we're really afraid of. Except when you go back and you look at those tweets of theirs from 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When we went back and looked at some of those older tweets, sure enough, Bob Malone was concerned. Florian Kramer was concerned.
Yep.
So.
And this contract that they signed under with Protein Sciences was meant to go through 2021. Which, wow. I mean, it just is all perfect. To me, it's perfect. I can see the big picture because I know all the slides that I have.
Right. Which is 2017 continued, and it says Memorandum of Understanding 225 MOU between the Food and Drug Administration and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yes.
Boy, what was this Memorandum of Understanding? What was this all about?
So this is actually over the next couple of slides, but I wanted to put this in there, one, because a lot of people don't know this, and two, because you have the gain of function. It's about ready to be completely lifted before, Trump's coming in. You got Rick Bright saying, hey, our stockpile's not good. And here the FDA gives Bill Gates this MOU that is in effect until it's terminated, period. So basically, Bill Gates wants, whatever he wants, he can get it approved under an EUA through the MOU given to him by the FDA in 2017.
So what's the nature of it? So you're saying that it pretty much continues in perpetuity, but the essence of this agreement, the essence of the Memorandum of Understanding is what exactly? What is it saying?
It basically is allowing him to give provision to use, to look at clinical trials for therapeutics, for vaccines, overseeing, the clinical trials. And, I think of during the COVID period, the remdesivir and his connection to scripts. And, I'm sure he was working under this MOU from the FDA to use all of
that. Who else has a Memorandum of Understanding from the FDA and doesn't have a college degree? Anyone? Anyone? Woody Harrelson? Does Woody Harrelson have one? How does this guy get this stuff? How do you get a Memorandum of Understanding with the FDA for your charity, for your nonprofit? Oh man, this is unreal. This is crazy. All right, and then on the next slide, you've got the notice announcing the removal of the funding pause. So this is when it ends.
Right. This is when it ends. So he, in the timeline, he gets his little MOU. We've got the removal of the restrictions to gain of function, and now we're welcoming in Trump at this point. So they basically gave all, and what this looks like to me is that they gave all of the things that potentially Trump wouldn't be looking at when he first came in. You've got all of these things that let's sneak them in under the radar, last minute, right at transition. This wouldn't be priority, in my opinion, to be looking for and looking into when you first, come into the Oval Office.
And then the next slide, I think you've got a photo of Kawaoka showing everybody his rabbit collection. What is that? What's he showing everybody there?
He's still doing gain of function.
Very nice.
He actually, John, I think I posted perhaps yesterday. He was still doing. I found evidence of him doing gain of function with H7N9 through 2018.
I don't doubt it. I mean, it's all he does. What do you think? He's going to walk his bicycle if he can ride his bicycle? Why would he walk his bicycle? It's like, come on, we got to crank through the mice here. We're not doing gain of function in their world is ridiculous. It's like, look, we're either going to do it or we're not, right? Let's not pretend. So if they're going to play this game, he's got to do gain of function. I mean, he's picking a vector of what he wants this thing to. Again, this trypsin free capability, this ability, to bind and enter the cell without a particular receptor. Come on, he's going after that capability. He's targeting that. And without gain of function, it would take him years to get to that point. With gain of function, he's probably done it in a week and a half. He's got what he needs. And he
should be good at it because he did the H5N1 gain of function
right before.
2000.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he described it, he tipped his hand in public and said, I only need to make 4 changes to the low pathogenic one, and you guys are in big trouble. You're not going to even know you have it because you're not going to get a fever because that's how I'm going to turn off its interferon production. If you don't get a fever, your interferon production doesn't crank up. That's what cranks up the interferon is your fever. It's it's like a thermostat. When you get 101.5, 102 fever, your body starts kicking in that interferon to combat whatever's going on. If you don't get a fever, your body doesn't realize you're sick. No need for any extra interferon. And the virus is just going and going and going. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, I don't know if you have this later in the deck, is this measles connection that we keep bumping into. But you've got this next slide is a Bill and Melinda Gates letterhead. What's this about?
This is from 2017. This kind of recaps and breaks down part of what their abilities are under that MOU.
Gotcha. Now this next slide looks like a creative way, maybe to funnel some money towards Warby or somebody. It's like you call it a contest. The Gates Foundation launches a $12 million grand challenge for a universal flu vaccine as Bill Gates urges the world to prepare for a war on pandemics. Boy, he's so insightful. Gates Foundation launches a $12 million challenge for universal flu vaccine, urges the world to prepare for a war on pandemics in 2018. And a moment ago, you were mentioning that, what was it, that somebody had purchased something? Sanofi was purchasing somebody for $750 million or something?
Oh, right. So earlier, I wanted to correct myself on that. You were correct. I said it backwards, and I apologize. That they were actually purchasing Protein Sciences, who was conducting this test vaccine for H7N9 in humans.
That makes sense.
Okay. So you were right.
Yeah, like I would have found a way to borrow 750 million to buy Sanofi. I would have made a couple phone calls. That's a hell of a price. All right, so
Yeah.
they bought the company in Connecticut for 750 million, which makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
that makes sense. And Bill Gates,
So their part in there, right? And then you've got Bill Gates, who's like, here's my 12 million. But I want to point out, and it doesn't say it in the headline here, but Larry Page of Google was part of this 12 million right here.
interesting. And
Yes,
he's
I
living
thought so as well.
and he's living in Bora Bora. He's about as checked out as anybody could be. He's living in the middle of the South Pacific with his hot
That
wife
must have
and
been where
kids.
he,
Yeah.
that must have been where he run off to when he went missing in May of
Yeah.
2023.
Yeah, they were trying to serve him with papers and they couldn't find him. All right, so the
Yes.
next slide you've got flu by anybody's account is one of the next pathogens, he said. The flu is a smart virus. It's constantly changing and adapting, rewriting parts of its genetic code to better invade our bodies. If another ultra aggressive flu virus, like the one seen in 1918, were to arrive on the scene today, nearly 33 million people worldwide would die in just 6 months. Wow. That's according to Bill Gates.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
So as he's giving away that, or giving the 12 million so graciously with Larry Page, he's making this statement.
So next time we might not be so lucky. You can have a virus where people feel well enough while they're infectious that they get on a plane or they go to a market. The source of the virus could be a natural epidemic like Ebola, or it could be bioterrorism. And so there are things that would literally make things 1,000 times worse. In fact, let's look at a model of a virus spread through the air like the Spanish flu back in 1918. So here's what would happen. It would spread throughout the world very, very quickly. And you can see there's over 30 million people die from that epidemic. So this is a serious problem. We should be concerned.
Interesting. Another ultra aggressive flu virus. I wonder what he knows in 2018.
Well, we should ask him. You know, he funded Yoshi's work on the H5N1 back in the 2000s.
Of course.
I don't know how many people know that.
I think he funds Warabi too. So it's kind of the thing. It's like it's hard to get anybody to step out of line when everybody's on the payroll. Or
Right.
everybody who matters, it seems, is on the payroll. I'm sure he's donating something to Fouchier, to Erasmus. And this is why Fouchier doesn't say anything. Marion Koopmans, I'm sure, is somehow on the payroll. Nobody steps out of line because he's got them all wrapped up financially. You know, if Warabi's taking in $250,000 a year from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and he's got a wife and kids at home, he can't afford to not get that $250,000 a year anymore. You know, it's like that would change his whole financial plan. So I think that's how a lot of this is managed. This next slide, you're showing us an influenza vaccine, and the clinical trials are beginning. This is an NIH document, and this is clinical trials for which vaccine was this? Is this the Novartis product?
No, this isn't Novartis. This is actually the Sanofi, that special one with the IIV.
Ah, the IIV version. I gotcha. So the Novartis product is already in clinical trials. Now we've got a Sanofi product. So this is the product that they teamed up with the company in Connecticut, right? And now this is going into clinical trials. So we have multiple products in clinical trials. And we know in 2018, we sign a contract with Pfizer. And that's on the next slide.
Yes.
So we've got Novartis in clinical trials, Sanofi in clinical trials, But that's not enough. We need another supplier, and so we do a contract with Pfizer / BioNTech in 2018 for an mRNA influenza vaccine.
Right.
I guess they were nervous. I guess they were worried. I guess they were concerned.
Well, and this is what's so crazy, John, is that so from 2013 until about the end of 2017, this first part of 2018, it's all H7N9, H7N9. Everybody's panicking. Everybody's talking about it. We got to push this universal vaccine. And then it just completely, in my opinion, goes just silent. There's nothing really from 2018, after these next couple slides until we hit the pandemic in 2019.
All right, well, let's look at this
According
slide.
to,
Let's look at this 2019 slide. Yeah, it says after a sharp decrease of influenza H7N9 virus in China in 2018, highly pathogenic H7N9 viruses reemerged in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
These H7N9 variants exhibited a new predominant subclade. Whoever's writing this is terrible. It should be dominant, not predominant. It's a dominant subclade.
It's word for word out of the article.
I know, but whoever's writing this, I swear, it's like,
no, I don't want your audience
who are they letting write this stuff? A predominant subclade, and had been co-circulating at a low level in eastern and northeastern China, not Ohio, not Minnesota, not Delaware. Several immune escape mutations and antigenic drift were observed. Several immune escape mutations and antigenic drift were observed in H7N9 variants. Certainly no gain of function. There was no gain of function observed. Nothing that we found here looks anything like what Kawaoka was working on. Although vaccination can largely control the occurrence of H7N9 virus outbreaks, it can also accelerate the generation of novel variants. This is Geert Vanden Bosch's "you don't vaccinate into a pandemic" because it's like whack-a-mole. You're going to create new variations as you do it, and that's what it says here. Right. Therefore, comprehensive surveillance and enhancement of biosecurity precautions should be undertaken immediately to prevent the influenza virus epidemic from becoming a pandemic. And so China embarks on a program to cull their chickens.
Yes.
And China begins killing chickens. But China's not the only one that's killing chickens in 2019. Turns out that the Japanese are killing the chickens. And the Malaysians are killing the chickens. And today, Thailand will not accept chickens from Europe. Today, Thailand has said thanks but no thanks. We're not interested in your chickens anymore. This isn't over. It may have waxed and waned, but it is not gone. This is still happening.
Yes.
All right, so that takes us to 2019 and the Crimson Contagion exercise, which lasts 9 months. What can you tell us about that? What are your thoughts on Crimson Contagion?
Well, I had read it. I had read the other one. Oh my goodness, that took place early fall of 2019. Event 21. 201.
Yep, 201.
And it wasn't until you and I, talking through DM and whatnot, that for whatever reason I was like, wait a minute, I'm going to go back and look at this Crimson Contagion again. I was looking up stuff from 1917. I saw a photo of the press secretary holding the plans that were being handed over from Obama to Trump, and this Crimson Contagion was in there. And so I thought, you know what, something's just telling me go back and look at it. And that's where I think I tagged you in a post and said, it's right there in front of us. We didn't even see it. H7N9 was right in one of their leaflets in that duration of their Crimson Contagion. And I think that's where we really started to look into H7N9.
Well, one of the things that I don't think people fully appreciate or aren't denoting, Event 201 was from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's what they call a tabletop simulation.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. Experts agree, unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
We have known about caps-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. And sure, there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult. I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic.
And people were assigned roles, and people were given a script to read from.
How should governments, business, and international organizations allocate and distribute pandemic antivirals and medical supplies to the people who need them most?
And it's developed by postdocs, people that just got their PhD and are now doing research at the university. And they're developing these tabletop simulations.
We could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread. That would be on the order of 500,000 cases, and it would continue to rise exponentially. In 3 months, we could be approaching 10 million cases.
And it lasts 3 hours. But Crimson Contagion is 8 months long. That's not a tabletop exercise. That's an exercise. That's not a simulation. So when it's 8 months long, that means something's up. Now, does it really end when they tell us it ends? Probably not, because Mike Pompeo says we're in a live exercise here.
And then, Mr. President, the other question I have for you.
Excuse me, we'll do it in a second. Let Mike has to
May I just say one more thing? There's been some discussion about China and what they knew and when they knew it, and I've been very critical. We need to know immediately. The world is entitled to know. The Chinese government was the first to know of this risk to the world, and that puts a special obligation to make sure that the data gets to our scientists, our professionals. This is not about retribution. This matters going forward. We're in a live exercise here. We're in a live exercise here to get this right. We need to make sure that
as things go forward, we're in a live exercise here. Right? So if we were in a live exercise and it was still Crimson Contagion, that might explain why he's carrying on so much. Because the chickens are dying left and right, and this is a really, really deadly, scary virus. Right? It has nothing to do with the other one. I'm not discounting the other one. Right? I still wouldn't want to get that. But this one's really bad. So I'm going to go to the slide that says January 2019 to August 2019. Crimson Contagion. was a joint exercise with numerous national, state, local, private, public organizations in the U.S. participated with 12 states to respond to a severe pandemic of H7N9 influenza originating in China. Okay, and we got all the different states that are participating. And then the next slide is the document from the United Nations that tells us that it was in the poultry.
Mm-hmm.
That this is spreading in the poultry.
And this is from 2019.
Right.
This particular, yeah.
So this is right before the COVID-19 outbreak. What we're hearing from the United Nations and the WHO and whatever it is that this H7N9 is spreading in China and it's in the chicken.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a conspiracy theory. That's well documented facts, right? This is pretty straightforward, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot of ambiguity here, is there?
No. And so you have this, you have, I posted something today, the map that shows the actual location of the human contraction of this from 2019. It's not, today, a couple years later, from 2019, showing these cases are hitting in humans. You have all of these countries culling their chickens, the crazy burning of the chickens.
A huge fire, a massive fire at an egg farm.
Tonight, a large fire damaged a plant southeast of Moses Lake.
Fast-moving flames tear through a barn in Bowling Green. Take a look at all of that smoke pouring out of there.
Battling 3 barn fires right now, big fires. Each building, we're told, has tens of thousands of chickens.
There are 3 chicken coops on fire.
There is a massive barn fire burning at Hickman's egg farm in Tonopah.
Nearly 300,000 chickens were trapped inside of this 3-story steel building on the outskirts of Ceres as flames and smoke took over.
Massive flames burned down a barn with tens of thousands of chickens inside in Wright County overnight.
A poultry farm fire in Lebanon County that has caused $12 million in damage.
2 chicken houses caught on fire in the Ruston community in Jones County last night.
Flames tore through a barn at a poultry farm early this morning.
Fire has destroyed a chicken house, killing thousands of chickens.
This massive fire, it happened late last night in Howard Lake, straight west of the cities on Highway 12.
News out of Pasco County. Crews battling a huge fire at a chicken farm. It's all happening on Cow Main Foods along Simpson Farm Lane in Dade City.
I miss, but don't be unkind. It don't mean I'm blind. Perhaps there's a thing or two I think of lying in bed I shouldn't have said, but there it is.
And it's only progressing. Then, of course, don't forget, now this is after this time, but we have the article that we have shown that shows that the test results from the first patients in Wuhan who also tested positive for influenza and H7N9, in addition to, COVID. So
that's how we started. That's what got us on this path to begin with. If Dayu didn't share that green and yellow thing, I don't know that we ever would have found any of this stuff. So, for whatever that's worth, one little tweet turned into all of this research. And I don't know that many of, most of the people who are watching this, I don't think had an awareness of how serious this avian influenza outbreak was, how widespread the culling was. South Africa, Australia, Japan, they're all killing chicken everywhere. Everybody's killing the chickens. So this is pretty serious and hardcore. I mean, everything I'm reading says the worst ever, the worst in human history.
Right. And you know, and I've had people ask me, well, you know, if this is your hypothesis, you know, why weren't more people dying in China if this H7N9? But you have to think of they've been exposed since 2013. Now they did have deaths throughout the pandemic, but they've been exposed to H7N9 since the start. So I imagine, you know, they have built up some sort of immunity to this H7N9, which would certainly explain why they didn't have, you know, the outrageous numbers, where, you know, the rest of the globe seriously has not had exposure, has no immunity to this. You know, if you go back and look in my feed, I mentioned you know, Tyson is where this all was identified in 2017. They're also the employer with the most infections and the most deaths outside of the healthcare exposure to people who were sick.
Oh my God. Where did you find that? That's huge. Where did you find that?
The effects of the H7N9 bird flu have been over 120 Chinese infected, and at least 39 have died in China. But Tyson Foods has also been affected. Their international chicken sales units have been seriously cut. Their stock has fallen the most in 5 years. Tyson reported a 10-fold increase in operating losses from its international unit for the fiscal second quarter. The Chinese may have returned to the KFC after being convinced that the cooked chicken is safe to eat, but the purchase of imported chicken from Tyson hasn't recovered in China. And that was the primary reason their international business fell by $30 million.
The CEO at Tyson Foods, Donnie Smith, said yesterday that Tyson will have to work through this issue in China. They have dialed back the international operations a bit. While Tyson is listed as the largest meat processor in the U.S. and second in the world only to Brazilian JBS, Tyson is mostly regarded for their chicken. The stock on the New York Stock Exchange fell 9.9%, the biggest drop since December 2008. Tyson's per-share profit in the quarter ending March 29th was 60 cents, lower than most analysts had predicted.
In addition to the 54 chicken processing plants, Tyson has 13 beef plants and 6 pork plants. The company is the largest exporter of beef, and with the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus now spread to 27 states, Tyson expects the pork industry to fall 4% this year.
That is somewhere in my timeline. I'll have to find it and tag you on it.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yes.
I did a show with Jason early on, I think June of 2020, maybe July of 2020, saying, are you going to eat that? Looking at, is this in the food supply? But we were looking at mostly the pork abattoirs, the pork processing plants, not the chicken coops. And boy, you talk about walking right by and just, just right next to us. It was like, oh, we were so close. And I was
And I think the only reason I even thought to look into it is, I went and worked out on the East Coast during all of this, and multiple of the poultry farmers, we were getting a lot of patients from the poultry farm, so much that the CDC actually showed up at this poultry farm during that time. But once we found that out, we don't really hear anything about it. What happens, what were their conclusions? Perhaps there's a report somewhere. But that's what made me think about it. I remembered all of those patients who were coming in who were working at the poultry farms.
Wow. Wow. That's huge. And if Tyson is the number one employer with illness and death, that's also rather major. That's a huge
Well,
development.
it's the poultry industry. I don't know that specifically it's Tyson. Now, Tyson has its own issues because they had some representatives higher up the food chain, no pun intended, but who were, I believe, let go because they were making bets on how many people would get sick from COVID working in their poultry plants. I posted that as well. I'll tag you on it.
That's pretty gross. All right, you've got a slide in here about EVALI. You want to talk about EVALI, or do you want to jump ahead to military games? What do you want to cover next?
I want to just talk about this EVALI real quick, and I know that this was more COVID based. Or prior to COVID, but I think it's really important. I've gone back and read the journal articles on these first cases of EVALI, and that is the kids that these people who were having they were saying it was due to their vapes. So prior to the pandemic being announced, you have all these vape lung injuries, pneumonias. You have the retirement community who had that, the pneumonias that swept the retirement community, and a couple of them died, as well as the EVALI patients. Also in that summer, early fall and into December, we had two lab leaks at Fort Detrick, and we had a lab leak at the University of Wisconsin, which is where Yoshi works. And there's some interesting details behind that specific leak. It wasn't reported on time. It was reported actually quite a bit later. The details are kind of fuzzy. Now, there is a FOIA on that that you can read, but they're still trying to find out the information. And specifically in one of the emails, Yoshi mentions, we don't need to say anything other than about these things. And H7 and 9 is not listed in the email of things that they have to disclose to the COVID Select Committee or whatever it's called.
Unreal.
So there's nothing on H7 and 9.
All right, I'm gonna ask you, please. I want to follow up with you on that. So you and I need to connect on that because I want to know more about this leak at the University of Wisconsin. And for people who aren't familiar with the term EVALI, this is the vaping lung. What does EVALI stand for? It's something with the vaping. So this was something where the kids were using the vape, and then they were getting some sort of nasty lung disease, and they blamed it on the vape cartridges were being counterfeit or something like that, or had some sort of ingredient that's not good for you. But
yeah, it's like electronic vape, acute lung injury or something like that. I'm sorry.
I'll Google it. I'll throw it up on the screen so people will know what it is. All right, so this next slide, you've got the logo from Event 201, which again, my thing with this is nothing compared to Crimson Contagion. This is a 3-hour exercise. This is almost like for the PR purposes, and they had Tom Inglesby and all the big names and all that come to this thing, but it's only 3 hours.
And I think it's also used as a distraction because they were publicizing it and talking about, people were focused on Event 201, not even looking at Crimson Contagion, and that's why I put that in there to kind of just show the whole timeline. And then we have the Wuhan games, and then who's involved in all of this. It's all just insane.
Well, that's it. So I think Event 201, you're right. I think it acts as a distraction. They've got all the big names there. So Avril Haines is there, Tom Inglesby's there, Miles Guo is there, all the big names. And that's what everybody's talking about. That's what Alex Jones is talking about. Everybody's talking about Event 201. And it's 3 hours long. And I'm looking
and what
at...
were they talking about in it? They were talking about a coronavirus, too. So that's why it all got hyped up, and everyone went to that.
Yeah, and that was in October. And so the Event 201 is taking place coincident with the Wuhan games,
Yes.
right?
The same day, I believe they started. Yeah, it is October 18th.
So coincident with that, but Crimson Contagion has been going on all year.
Right.
Been going
But
on
nobody
all
was
year.
talking about it.
Right. Because one is a exercise and the other is a simulation. Event 201 is a simulation. It's a simulated fictional coronavirus passing to humans via infected pig farms in Brazil. Right? No possibility of a vaccine in the first year. All right, next slide. Universal flu vaccine. Come back to that always. Experts discuss the scientific and technological prospects of an effective universal influenza vaccine at the Milken Institute. The speakers include Tony Fauci, Margaret Hamburg, Rick Bright and his socks, Tony Tolkien, Bruce Gellin, Michael Spector, who is the master of ceremonies. He writes for New Yorker magazine, and he, I think, is like a guest lecturer at Stanford, and Casey Wright. And so we get to watch these guys at the Milken conference. This is Michael Milken, formerly the head of Drexel, Burnham, and Lambert, the junk bond kings, and he ends up spending a bunch of time in prison. But when you come out of prison, everybody acts like he never went to prison. So he gets to hold these conferences, and everybody acts like he never went to prison. And they're all talking about getting off of eggs. They're all talking about getting off eggs. We really got to get off eggs. We really got to get off eggs. And I'm watching this. I'm like, well, have you seen the chart that Amy showed us last week? Because you got 10 different mRNA vaccines in production over here at Moderna alone. What are you guys bitching about the eggs for? Why are you complaining? And in fact, the president had already signed the executive order for modernizing influenza vaccines a month prior to Event 201, a month prior to the Milken Conference. It's already signed. So why are these guys all, oh, we got to get off eggs. We got to get off of eggs. Paperwork's done. Moderna's got a pipeline of 12 different, they got Zika, Chikungunya, RSV, H7N9, H10N2. Why are these guys carrying? It seems like this is for show. This is for the public.
Right.
These guys have been doing all this stuff for years already. Rick Bright knows this. Rick Bright is BARDA. He knows this. I feel like I'm watching a charade when I watch this event.
Right.
All right, your next slide, February 2020. 15. What do you got?
Oh, sorry.
What?
I missed. I was going to make a comment. I said I had to put the picture in of Rick Bright with his socks for you. So.
You did, and I'll run a quick clip so everybody knows what I'm talking about with Rick Bright and his socks.
And I'm just sort of curious, why are we so bad at protecting ourselves from what many people consider the sort of most likely virus to cause the most damage to humanity? And I'm going to let any one of you who wants to answer this do so.
I already answered.
No.
Thanks, Michael. And I wish the narrative would have come up on the video coming through, because what's called out in that narrative is a sense of urgency to address this problem. I mean, there are still 650,000 people around the world dying every single year from seasonal influenza. And if we take that scenario that Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation funded from the Institute for Disease Modeling that says if we had another outbreak like a pandemic virus today, what we saw in 1918, in that 6-month time period, we would have 33 million people dead. And not only that, that virus would have been seeded all over.
As of February 2020, a total of 1,568 laboratory-confirmed human cases of H7N9 and 616 related deaths had been reported for a fatality rate of 40%. I'm going to tell you, I don't think I had the highly pathogenic version. I think I had the low pathogenic version, and it still wiped me out for 10 days. So this highly pathogenic version, this is what I wanted to ask you about the measles. You and I keep stumbling across stuff that connects to measles.
Maybe, Natasha, I'll start with you. Our European office recently reported 30 times increase in measles cases in 2023 since a year before. So could you please tell us more about this trend in Europe, but also in the other parts of the world is measles?
Right.
What is this about? Can you talk to the audience about this measles connection and what you've been seeing clinically, what we've been reading about clinically? What is this measles H7N9 connection potentially? What's this all about, please?
I don't know for certain, other than being in the hospitals myself. We have measles literature all over everywhere now, the emergency room. There's videos coming out. We're having talks about how we're going to prep for this. Of course, you and I know about the measles outbreak back in 1917. Is it connected?
Talk about that a little bit, because the audience may not be aware of that. So 1917, coincident with this bird flu, this avian flu, what happens?
Mm-hmm. Well, they have this measles outbreak, but during this time they end up with so many people ending up with this pneumonia that is actually killing all these, specifically a large amount of our military servicemen. But it's right about around that time that they have this measles outbreak. Now, I would have to go back and look. I don't remember when the actual inoculations for measles started. I should know that, but I don't. But it is a little interesting. And of course, I showed you that they were combining the measles and the COVID vaccine too. They used like the foundation of the measles vaccine and just thought, oh, hey, this will work great with COVID. So
yeah, I saw that post and I said, that reminds me of that movie, I Am Legend, where they said, yeah, we're going to take the measles virus and we're going to put something in there. And next thing you know, everybody in New York is dead and there's lions running up and down Broadway. Maybe using measles. Really? It's like, how come that wasn't reported on? This is the first I'm hearing that the COVID vaccine started with measles virus? Who, where, huh?
The world of medicine has seen its share of miracle cures, from the polio vaccine to heart transplants, but all past achievements may pale in comparison to the work of Dr. Alice Crippen. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Not at all.
So, Dr. Crippen, give it to me in a nutshell.
Well, the premise is quite simple. Take something designed by nature and reprogram it to make it work for the body rather than against it.
You're talking about a virus?
Indeed, yes. In this case, the measles virus, which has been engineered at a genetic level to be helpful rather than harmful. And I find the best way to describe it is if you can imagine your body as a highway and you picture the virus as a very fast car being driven by a very bad man, imagine the damage that car could cause. But then if you replace that man with a cop, the picture changes, and that's essentially what we've done.
How many people have you treated so far?
Well, we've had 10,009 clinical trials in humans so far.
And how many are cancer-free?
10,009.
So you have actually cured cancer?
Yes. Yes, we have.
Who did that? Was that Johnson & Johnson? Was that Novartis? Was that... Who was monkeying with the measles here?
And monkeypox, don't forget about that one. Yeah, I'll have to go back and look. My memory is not...
Yeah, when you
sharp
posted it, I was like in
yes.
shock. I was like, what?
Yeah.
What? What are they doing? So, yeah, that's also worthy of some follow-up is who was working with the measles angle? Because I'll tell you, I read the process for Novavax, and Novavax said, yeah, we're not doing what Moderna's doing, and we're not doing what Pfizer's doing. Here's what we do. We take a virus from a moth, and we put the SARS-CoV-2 thing inside that virus. And I'm like, I'm not interested in your moth-based product. I don't want to be attracted to the light for the rest of my life, right? I'll be walking into the fireplace, and anybody lights a candle, I'm going to end up with my eyebrows burned. So I'm not interested in it. What do you mean you're growing the virus inside a moth virus? That's okay? The FDA's cool with this? They didn't watch...
The FDA is okay with it, yes.
They didn't watch The Fly?
If you go back to the history under this protein sciences that Sanofi took over,
In Connecticut,
they used that same method.
Insect virus. They're taking a virus from an insect that they consider benign. But who the hell knows? It's like if it's a virus from a moth or a virus from a house fly or a virus from a spider, what the hell are they doing using that as the basis for anything? We were growing these things in chicken eggs, right? We were growing things in Vero monkey kidney cells. And next thing you know, Kevin McKernan says, hey, you know what's weird? I find SV40. Well, SV40 is simian virus, monkey virus. Vero monkey kidney cells have monkey virus. That's not a mystery. If you grow stuff in Vero monkey kidney cells, you might find some monkey virus in there. SV40. So when you start growing stuff on measles and you start growing stuff in moth viruses, maybe we should just focus on the therapeutics and you take a pill when you get sick. This inoculation business is really turned into a bit of a monster, and I know I'm editorializing a little bit, but gee whiz.
Right. Well, and you said it right. It's a business. It's about making money.
But what's wrong with therapeutics as a business? What's wrong with charging me $125 for Zofluza? I'd rather have the therapeutic if I'm sick than have to take a preventative once a year to not get sick. I don't know.
Expose you to the illness when you're healthy.
And when you look at the schedule,
crazy.
Yeah, you look at the schedule that they're doing for kids now, it's like, but what's the likelihood I'm going to develop these things or that I'm going to contract these things? When I went to Africa, I think it was 2010, I went to Africa, and I got inoculated for dengue because I was going to an area where, it's known to have dengue. So I got inoculated for that. So I'm not anti-vax like, for example, if I was going to visit a leper colony on the island of Molokai, I probably would want to get vaccinated prior to going to visit the leper colony. Right? But do I need to get vaccinated for Ebola if I live in Kansas City, Missouri? What the hell do I need to get vaccinated for Ebola for? What's the likelihood I'm going to get exposed to it? Now, if I live in Sierra Leone, I might consider it. But it just seems like they want to vaccinate everybody for all these different things rather than pursue the therapeutic treatment if and when somebody contracts it. And I don't know. I don't understand what this fascination is with this. I think the technical term that I've learned from J.J. Couey and these others is transfection. So, sticking a needle into the muscles and putting something in there, they call it a transfection. So, all right, this next slide, we're going to run out of time in just a couple minutes. So why don't we
be quick?
Yeah, let's wrap up on the last couple slides here. We've got this 2020 continued highly pathogenic avian influenza viruses in the poultry in the United States in 2020, and this is according to the CDC.
Mm-hmm. And this is just, even though it's this H7N3, the kicker is on the next slide, that when they looked at it closer, it is actually what the highly pathogenic influenza H7N9 that was in the poultry outbreak back in Tennessee in 2017.
Ooh, so they're saying retroactively it wasn't what we thought it was actually this?
At least have these amino acids and this cleavage site in it.
All right, and this cleavage site is kind of a big deal, right? This is a different type of cleavage site. This is not CGG-CGG. CGG-CGG is for the ACE2 receptor. This is a different type of cleavage site. This doesn't need an ACE2 receptor. Am I right about that?
I believe so, and I'm still looking into information on this one.
Yeah, I think this is a different type of cleavage site. This is like a battle axe. This just busts a hole anywhere in the cell wall it wants. This is a sledgehammer, I'm afraid, and that's why it's able to do so much. So that's remarkable. So we have confirmation from the CDC of highly pathogenic H7N9, and they're saying, and retroactively going back to 2017, 7 years ago. It's like that's kind of a mic drop moment. So with that, I will thank you again for sharing your research with the audience, with me, and any parting words to wrap up. What your takeaway is so far? What do you think of what we're finding here?
Well, I think there's a lot more yet to come. This has opened up many more questions for me. Especially with rolling out the H7N9 PCR again just recently. There's a lot of questions.
Well, now that we know that we've been developing these vaccines for some time, the Chinese have vaccines, they've been vaccinating the poultry, the bird culling continues, and the fires continue. So we're going to, we have to keep our eye on this and see what else develops. Amy, I'm so grateful that you've taken this time with us. You are a hero of the pandemic. I'm John Cullen. Thanks for joining.
You all know what happened in 1917. That's over 100 years ago. You look at 1917, the pandemic. It was something. The worst pandemic since 1917. 1917. That's something. 1917 was a time. In 1917, it was vicious. Everybody that writes a book about the Spanish flu, 1917. The big one was 1917. You read about him. You read about it from 1917. A virus, the likes of which this world has not seen since 1917.